Meda and the Mediterranean Sea, written and narrated by Amelia Nichole. A soft scratching echoed down the bright hallway. Meda couldn't remember how she came to be in this empty museum. Nautical art broke up the endless white walls and marble floors. Greek relics and sculptures of sea creatures were encased in glass. She followed the muted sound to an exhibit room with seafoam green walls. Inside, a painter stood with his back to her. His brush scratched the paint onto the canvas as he recreated the oil painting on the wall. The battle between a monster and a hero over the fate of a helpless woman chained to some stone were depicted inside the minimalist frame. Her head pounded. Why does that painting feel so familiar? In this mysterious painter's rendition, the woman was not chained to the stone, but stood defiantly facing the sea monster. "What are you painting?" Meda whispered, hesitant to break the silence. The painter turned to her and smiled. A mess of golden curls framed his paint-splattered face. This is my version of the Rescue of Andromeda. The Roman poet Ovid described her as a sun-kissed princess, and yet the Greeks depicted Andromeda to suit their image of idealized beauty. I know this place. Meda remembered the taste of salt on her tongue, and the terrible helplessness of her limbs turning numb as the waves dragged her deeper and deeper into the cold, unforgiving depths. I remember drowning there. Someone dived in to save me. In the Mediterranean Sea? Perhaps you visited the coast of Libya. The man fixed her with a pointed gaze. His skin was fair, his shoulders broad, and his jaw square. He looked eerily similar to the hero in both paintings, except he had a paintbrush in the place of a sword and wore a smock instead of a billowing white toga. Who are you? Meda stuttered, trying to cover her surprise. The painter paused. Pierce. There you are, Meda. I've been waiting for you in the lobby for 10 minutes. A familiar woman approached her. She had a dark complexion, much like her own. I'm starving. I must have lost track of time. Meda allowed the woman to guide her away from the painter. They traversed the grand staircase down into an expansive lobby. Giant sculptures of a whale and an orca hung from the high ceiling. Most noticeable was the blank space where the sculpture should have been. Meda stepped out of the museum and into the sunlight. The metalwork silhouette of a blacksmith stood before the museum. It stretched into the sky and drew her eye to the massive skyscrapers surrounding them. Seattle. That's right. I'm on vacation in Seattle with my friend Danny. She grabbed her phone and did a search for Andromeda. The first link talked about Andromeda Galaxy. The next search result was a page about Andromeda in mythology. So distracted by her phone, Meda didn't see the massive puddle until she stepped in it, filling her shoes with water. But there's not a cloud in sight. Where did this puddle come from? Danny laughed. Always buried in your phone. Look what that got you. A pair of waterlogged shoes. Let's grab a bite to eat across the street. When their day of shopping and sightseeing ended, Meda tumbled into bed. The painting at the Seattle Art Museum filled her thoughts. Loud arguing in the other room made it impossible for her to sleep. How am I supposed to sleep with this racket? I'm going to take a dip in the hotel's pool. Careful not to wake her friend, Meda grabbed her swimsuit and opened the door. The tacky orange and black carpet in the hallway seemed to go on forever. The voices from the other room grew louder. They must have left the door open. She peeked into the room as she walked by. She couldn't help it. Their room looked nothing like her own. A woman faced an unearthly man with her arms crossed. Her dark tresses were woven with gold ribbon, and she wore a crown atop her braids. Her dress was embroidered with colorful, geometric shapes. Underneath the finery, the queen seemed familiar. What in the world? The man wore no crown upon his head, no gold around his neck, but he did not need such things to prove his worth. The man radiated pure power. His hair blew around his face, and a blue haze surrounded him. The woman laughed. Ha! Andromeda is more beautiful than all the nads in the Mediterranean Sea. Andromeda? A drop of cold water trickled down her back, and she shivered. Who are these people? You vain, cruel creature! I gave you a chance, and you will not receive another one. The man stormed towards the door. Meda clambered back into her room before he left. The woman shouted, You cannot have my daughter, no matter how you rage and howl. Meda's heart beat hard in her chest. She grabbed her phone. Okay, I need answers. She tried to pull up the webpage about Andromeda in mythology. Page not found. She searched it up again. Page after page referenced the Andromeda galaxy, but nothing about the name Andromeda in mythology. She even searched for the painting in the online catalog of the Seattle Art Museum, but nothing came up. Sunlight filtered through the blue curtains, and she heard Danny run the shower. How can it be morning already? The smell of seaweed and salt beckoned her to the open balcony. A seagull's cry echoed across the water. The rising sun lit the depths of Elliot's Bay, and a dark shape slithered through the deep. Meda took an involuntary step back. It could have been a whale, or an orca, or anything else that isn't a sea monster. Yeah, coffee. I need coffee. Meda got 2 mugs and poured pre-ground coffee into the machine. She went to fill up the pot with water. There was a goldfish swimming in the sink. Danny, did you get a fish yesterday? Meda called through the bathroom door, at her wit's end with all this nonsense. What? No, Danny replied from the shower. But when she looked back, the goldfish was gone. Am I really that tired? Never mind, she called back. Over a breakfast of self-serve waffles, she said, I want to go back to the Seattle Art Museum. Danny laughed. I knew you wouldn't be able to keep away when you saw that work of art. Meda almost choked on her bite. You know? Sweetheart, no one could mistake the look on your face. Danny winked, and Meda realized she wasn't referring to the painting. You can go to the museum while I shop at the Pike Place Market, and we can meet up afterwards. The metal silhouette of the blacksmith hammered on his anvil before the tan stone and brick museum. Bracing herself, Meda stepped through the doorway. A realistic squid had joined the whale and orca sculptures suspended from the ceiling. Meda took the stairs 2 steps at a time, and tried to ignore the eyes of the squid following her. Without thinking about it, Meda found the painter, but the wall in front of him was bare. Where's your muse? Standing before me, Pierce offered her an impish grin. Back to see my progress? I couldn't stay away, Meda laughed. The woman in the painting had her same dark curly hair and complexion. Pierce gestured to the empty space in the wall. They sent the painting off to another museum. You would think they would have let me know after they agreed to let me use it for my art studies. A webpage disappeared too, Meda said. You seem to be the only one who knows about the myth of Andromeda. Pierce grinned. Andromeda is the princess of Ethiopia. Her story starts when the sea god Poseidon wanted to take her as his bride. When the queen refused, he sent a monster to ravage their kingdom. That's terrifying. Meda pointed to the satchel the hero in the painting held. What's he carrying? Pierce hesitated before he answered in a hushed tone. The head of Medusa, who he had slain only hours before finding Andromeda. Every man who gazes upon Medusa's face is turned to stone. But Athena gave him a polished shield so he could view her reflection to defeat her without looking upon her face. A drop of water splashed on her head. The ceiling was warped and discolored from water from the upper story. How? I better move my canvas. Pierce started to pack up his painting supplies and offered her a cloth to dry her hair. I'd be happy to answer more questions. Meda patted the water out of her hair. Why isn't your Andromeda chained? The original painters depicted Andromeda confronting Cetus without fear. Why would someone who shows no fear be chained to a stone? I didn't think it made any sense. Pierce carefully removed the canvas out into the hallway. Meda pondered the question. Maybe she chose to face it, to save her people. I doubt the Greeks would want to show a woman as a heroine. Exactly, Pierce smiled. And then the hero sees the unequal battle about to take place and decides to take the side of the beautiful princess. Meda stared in mute disbelief as Pierce's clothes morphed into the flowing toga favored by the Greeks. No. This can't be real. It has to be another hallucination, like the goldfish. Don't look at me like that. Your dress has changed too, Pierce said. Meda now wore a long dress embroidered with geometric patterns. What is happening to me? You aren't gonna believe me. Pierce bit his cheek. You're fighting to remember the truth and bringing bits of your world into this one. My world, Meda parroted. Well, our world. We aren't from this place where legends are dead and gods are myths. Pierce nodded towards the door. If you want to go back to your boring normal life, all you have to do is walk through that door and go home. But if you're willing to face the wonderful and terrifying truth, I can promise you it's far better than anything this world can offer. She could be free of these hallucinations and strange happenings if she left the city. 3 steps towards the door, Meda paused. But if I leave, I'll never find out where I'm from, or why this is happening to me. Pierce had a sincere expression of concern on his face. No, you will have to live with the fact that you will never know the truth, and you can never return home. Distant shouts and a frightening roar reverberated through the museum. Are you sure that you want to see? His tone was full of warning. Meda didn't want to look, but her body refused to follow her wishes. A writhing mass of scales and fins slithered across the docks, laying waste to everything near the great Ferris wheel. The broken remains of a ferry floated in the bay. Meda screamed, but she couldn't drown out the crushing, scraping sound of the monster destroying everything in its path. Her father's baritone cut through the cacophony. The oracle was clear in this matter. If we want to appease the monster, we must sacrifice Andromeda. Sacrifice? Hazarding a glance down the alleyway where his voice came from, Meda saw a room just like the one she had seen in the hotel. The arguing woman shook her head. Without her finery, she finally recognized the woman as her mother. I will not kill our daughter to appease Poseidon. There has to be another way. Poseidon, Poseidon, Poseidon. The name made her head hurt and her stomach roll. The other way was to accept his proposal and bless their marriage, her father grimaced. Her mother gasped. How could you say that? You know what happens to the wives of Poseidon. He thinks just because he has control over the sea, he can have his pick of any woman. He is a god. He is not a god. A god does not steal wives and discard them as he grows tired of them. A god does not send a monster upon his people when he doesn't get his way. A god would not demand the death of my only daughter because he cannot have her. He is not a god. He is not even a man. He is a monster. Someone touched her shoulder, and she whirled around to see it was Pierce. You must choose now. How can I choose to live in a world full of vengeful gods and horrible sea monsters? Meda pushed away from his grasp. A world is so much more than the terrible things. Our world is full of brave heroines and heroes, legendary love, unbreakable bonds, limitless freedom, and indescribable beauty. The earth rumbled and the sea monster burst through the pavement, transforming the road into water in its wake. Meda couldn't breathe, much less scream, as a serpent's hot, stinking breath caressed her face, and relentless waves battered and bruised her unprotected body. Leave her alone! Pierce drew a sword with a small, curving blade sprouting from the tip. Meda screamed and sidestepped a swipe of the monster's claws. You're running out of time. You must choose, or Cetus will choose for you. Pierce's voice held a note of panic as he cut and slashed at the sea monster. I choose my world, Meda gasped, and the whole world shook. I am Andromeda, and Poseidon wants me dead. Andromeda remembered listening to her mother rebuke the god of the sea for his demand of her hand in marriage. She remembered Poseidon sending the sea monster slithering onto the docks to kill her people. She remembered how it felt to hear her own father admit her death was the only way to stop the monster. The fear she quelled when she snuck out into the stone to face the sea monster, and her relief when she watched Pierce fly through the sky, sword gleaming. Poseidon sent me here! Yes, that's it, Pierce grinned, finally gaining the upper hand against the monster. He plunged his sword through the monster's head. I knew you had it in you. Now hold your breath. As the other world melted away, Andromeda tried to ignore how the salt water stung her eyes. Pierce helped her to breach the surface of the sea. They swam for the stone island where the body of the monster lay. The foaming waves of the Mediterranean Sea cleaned away the blue-green blood of the monster. Andromeda pulled herself onto the rocks, heedless of their sharp edges. The same unearthly man from her memories hovered over the water. He was made of sea foam and swirling water. You dare defy a god? Poseidon yelled and sent waves to pull her hero under the shimmering wine-colored water until she couldn't even see his silhouette. Andromeda held fast to the stones. Every part of her body ached. A satchel, dripping with black ichor, tumbled past her, and the head of a monster with snakes for hair spilled forth. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for Medusa's head to turn her to stone. The earth stilled, and she took another breath. Opening her eyes, she stared at the ugly face. Every man who gazes upon Medusa's face. He is not a god. He's not even a man. He's a monster. She prayed the words her mother had spoken were true, and recovered the Gorgon's head. You call yourself a god? Andromeda shouted. She had to make him come to shore. A god wouldn't punish a nation because they refused to give him a bride. A tyrant gives cruelty in the place of mercy, condemns instead of offering another chance, and commands rather than giving others a choice. Mercy? Choice? How could your god compare to the power of the god of the seas, horses, and earthquakes? Poseidon laughed, and the earth rumbled. If my god is so powerless, explain to me how I'm still standing here after all you've done. You sent a monster to kill me, and he lays slain at your feet. You trapped me in a terrible world, and I broke free. Andromeda would not allow him to have power over her any longer. He could not move her, no matter the waves he threw at her, nor how he shifted the earth beneath her feet. Before my father came to Ethiopia from Greece and brought his gods with him, my people knew the difference between true gods and pretenders. And you are nothing more than a narcissistic water sprite. Poseidon's face twisted with rage. I will strangle you with my bare hands. I will put you in the sky for 1,000 years of torture. No one from your country will dare ever mock me again. The moment his feet touched the stone, Andromeda held the head of the Gorgon high. After Poseidon lay with the priestess of Athena in her own temple, she proclaimed, "Every man who gazes upon the face of Medusa shall be turned to stone." No! Poseidon stumbled back at the sight of the monster's head with snakes for hair. Abject fear twisted his face into a hideous expression. The tips of his fingers turned white, and his heavy hands fell to his sides. He twitched and convulsed as the stone took his coveting eyes. A cry escaped his lips, only to be silenced as the marble worked its way down his body. You were undone by your own misdeeds. Andromeda watched as the sea he once commanded swallowed the statue of the false god. She covered the Gorgon's head with the satchel and searched the water for Pierce. Nothing. She dove in. Every volcanic rock looked like a still body. Every strand of kelp tricked her eyes into seeing waving arms. She went up several times before she finally spotted his white toga. Andromeda struggled to the surface with Pierce's dead weight. Tears obscured her vision as she tried to revive him. Her hero gasped, heaving seawater. What happened? Andromeda took a look at the ichor-soaked satchel. Medusa's gaze only affects men, not women. I used the Gorgon's head to turn that terrible man to stone. Pierce's eyes widened, and he shivered. Wait, if he can die, if he isn't a god, does that make me mortal too? Andromeda's father had not taken the news about Poseidon's demise well. He wanted to banish her to prevent the other gods from punishing them. Her mother scolded him for caring more about a false god than her own daughter. They didn't even notice when she slipped away. Andromeda stood outside Pierce's room and waited for Danny to proclaim her hero fit for travel. She didn't even know what his real name was, and yet she remembered the way he had looked at her in that world, the way he had fought for her against the monster, Cetus. How he dove into the other world without a second's hesitation to help her save herself. He is fit enough, but he should rest for another few days. Danny sniffed, knowing the hero types never follow physicians' advice very well. Andromeda slipped into the room and watched him pack his things. Is it safe to assume your name isn't Pierce? He laughed. No one but my mother calls me that. My full name is Perseus, son of Zeus, but I guess that doesn't mean what it used to. Andromeda rubbed her wrist. I didn't get a chance to thank you for saving me. And my country. You saved my life and defeated a god. I think we can call it even. His expression softened. I shudder to think of the things I've done without knowing my own mortality. Many people would not have defended me against that monster. Fewer still would have risked their life by entering that terrible world Poseidon sent me to. Andromeda looked out the window and watched her people rebuilding the docks. You're a hero because of your actions and your choices, not who your father is. Perseus straightened from strapping on his winged sandals. Your words touch me, princess. Where will you go? Andromeda longed to ask him to take her on his next adventure. He sheathed his sword and picked up the new satchel holding a special burden. I must save my mother from a terrible king. He sent me to retrieve the Gorgon's head, believing I would fail, so he could have his way with her. You know, we make a good team. Perseus glanced at the open window and offered a shy smile. What do you say? Andromeda embraced him. I say the gods had better prepare, for we are a force to be reckoned with.